Hey everybody, welcome back. Today I want to teach you about 6 different ways to create the illusion of space in a 2D work of art. So for the longest time, artists have had this problem, right? They've got a canvas or a piece of paper and they're trying to show this immense depth and distance. And how do you do that? Well, over the centuries, artists have figured out some tricks that are tried and true so that we can let the viewer look like they're looking into the artwork, like they're seeing an immense amount of space and depth. In fact, there's 6 ways that most artists agree are the 6 basic ways to do this, and they're called the 6 illusions of space. I mean, after all, we're not really creating space. That's for the architects to do, but we're trying to, on a 2-dimensional surface, make it look like you can look way far off into the distance. I'm going to show you those 6 tricks today. So here is our 6 illusions of space. Here they are: overlapping, shading, placement, size, value and focus, and linear perspective. Now this is something I drew, and I just made it simple with circles so it's easy to understand. But I'm going to ask you to draw 6 boxes on a piece of paper over here off to the side, and we'll put those main titles underneath as well. But I don't want you to draw the same circles. Those are kind of boring. We're going to have fun with this. So let's set this up right now. Right at the top of your page, will you write the 6 illusions of space? And then just go ahead and draw yourself 6 boxes. Don't worry about how perfect these are. I mean, if you're a perfectionist and you want to get out a ruler and make them look really pretty, that's okay. It's your notes. That's up to you. I'm just going to freehand these, and because to me, that's not so important. Understanding them is what's important. But making a masterpiece, we're going to save that for a future project. All right, there's 4. And just a couple more. And I'll explain all about these. Okay. Well, let's mess with our first one, which is overlapping. So right down here, just write overlap. This is a pretty straightforward one, pretty easy to understand. Even without any shading or anything, you can see that this circle here is obviously the one in front. And by the fact that this one starts and stops, and you can't see the whole circle, well, then we know that this one is behind this one. Here's one more example. This one has a start and stop, and we know instinctively this one is in front, this one's next, this one's next. Even though I did use a tracer and drew these circles the exact same size, size doesn't really matter in this case. It's just which is in front and which are overlapped. Now, I don't want you to draw circles. Maybe draw something different. So whatever your go-to is, it could be houses or flowers or hands, or I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to draw an apple here. There we go. And let's have a little stem coming out of here. Give it a little highlight. Okay, so there's an apple. Now I can draw another behind here, and I'm not going to draw the whole apple, of course. I'm just going to go like that. And because it stops right there and started right there, we know that this one is behind. And I'll draw one more. Maybe I'll make this one on its side. There you go, an example of overlapping. And if you really want to ground these, like make them feel like they're sitting on a table or on the ground, you could throw a horizontal line back here. Kind of cool. Well, actually, what that is overlapping. We know that because this line stops or starts, that this is in front of or on like the edge of a table. So overlapping is pretty powerful stuff. All right, let's move on to shading. Shading's pretty straightforward. I'll stick with the fruit theme here, although you could draw whatever you want. If you want to draw a little horse or draw a pencil or a glass, I'm going to draw a pear. Well, when you just do it with lines, and now that line becomes a shape, well, that's kind of boring. It's not doing a whole lot. But as soon as you start adding shading, like a cast shadow here, then it's going to make it look like it really occupies a space. Well, better, but still, I think doing some shading like this off to one side is really going to make it feel like it's occupying a space. Okay, it's going to look a little bit more three-dimensional. Or we could use that in combination with some overlapping. Now it feels more 3D. So shading, just doing that simple shading really makes it feel three-dimensional and like it occupies, even though it's a small or shallow space, but it occupies some space. So don't underestimate shading. It's got a little glare there, but there you go. Hopefully you can see that a bit better. All right, let's move into the next one, which is placement. Just where you place things. Let's go back and look at our slides over here. I know because I used a stencil to draw these circles. I made them all the same size. But you know which one's in front or which one's closest to you? Well, which one is placed higher or lower in the scene? This one here appears to be closer, even though it's the same size as this one. It's just how our mind works. You know, if you're driving down the road and this is your windshield, you're going to run into this thing first and this thing later. So the placement, you might even write vertical placement. I'll make a little note here, vertical, like your vertebrae, you know, they go up and down. The vertical placement of objects within a scene, whether they're higher or lower, really matters. It can tell you what's closer to you or what's further away. Okay, so let's do something. This time maybe I'll go with bananas. I'm going to stick with my theme, but again, you can draw something else. If you want to do this with hearts or whatever, you know, fill in the blank, you can do it. So I'm going to make one down here. That's how we draw just a simple banana. And I'll do another back here. And I'm going to try to keep these relatively the same size. Make another one here. We'll get to size in a minute. But if you saw these in front of you, you'd reach for this one first because it just appears to be closer to you. It's just how we see things, okay? Now size, that one is kind of obvious. If you want to make something look far away, you make it smaller. So we'll just make, I'll go with something different this time. I'll make a house. Real simple house. If I make a smaller house, that house appears to be further away. But here's the deal. You can use vertical placement and size in conjunction or together with one another, kind of like they're related, like cousins. And then it really makes things look far away. So if I make something much smaller and I place it up even higher, that house is going to look really far away. Let's just make a hill here. So these look like they actually live somewhere. Put sun up here in the sky and a cloud, just so we kind of know what's going on. So I'm going to make a really small one back here. So notice how changing the size and where you place it vertically in your scene really matters. So artists know this trick. They just know not only do you make it smaller, but you can't just make it smaller here. If you put it next to this one, then, well, it kind of looks like a doghouse because they're on the same vertical placement. So maybe you want to even draw that just so you remember. It's not just about size, it's about size and placement, and those two go hand in hand. All right, I'm going to stop right there and come back to these last two because they're kind of tricky. I'm going to fast forward and show you some of this. So let's minimize this a little. So here's just one example of overlapping, the great pyramids on the Giza Plateau in Egypt. Obviously, you know which pyramids are in front, these three smaller ones. And then this one, and then this one, and this one. Because this one behind it, you know, it kind of stops. Or this one behind here stops right at that point. So it's obviously because of those starts and stops that we recognize which is further back. This is just how our brain works. We intuitively know this. Shading. Well, I did up here, but if this was your drawing, which looks like a coloring book, just contour lines, it's not nearly as exciting as this one here. This does not occupy a space. It looks 2D, it looks flat. This looks like something you could pick up because of the highlights and form shadows and cast shadows. So don't underestimate that shading and how it can really create even a small sense of space. Size. I know it's just a rough sketch, but you can tell just by changing the size of these conifers or these cone-shaped trees, which is further back and which one is closer. Vertical placement. Notice these boats. These boats in actuality, although it's just a drawing, it's actually a print. This one could be the same size as this, but because of the placement and in conjunction with the size, we recognize that this one is much further back, right? So here's another example of size and placement. These hay bales that are lowest or in the foreground are obviously the largest, and in actuality, these are likely all the same size roughly. But these ones up by the horizon, oh, they're so small. They look so tiny. So where they're placed matters. Now this is a photograph, so they were placed by the farmer, but if we wanted to recreate this or draw this, we would place these lower. Now, notice above the horizon, slightly different story. When you get up here, the clouds are large. Obviously, if we got up even higher up and they were right over your head, they would be even larger. They'd be right over you. But as you come down lower in the horizon, although these clouds may be the same size in actuality, this one looks much smaller. And then this one looks much smaller. And the closer you get to the horizon, that makes sense. It's like the furthest point away. Everything gets super duper small, right? All right, let's talk about value and focus. Here's the deal. There's a lot of stuff in our atmosphere. Sometimes it's rain or fog or some mist. There's always dust. And that dust over, if you're looking out over a mile or 2 or 3, that dust starts to accumulate and it blurs things. You don't see it right in front of you because you're just looking around your room and you might see only 10 feet away or 50 feet away. If you're looking at a football field, the people on the other side of the field might look slightly lighter, but it's really especially pronounced if you're looking at, say, a mountain range and you're looking 15 miles away. There's so much dust in our atmosphere that it makes things look lighter. It's just how things work. If you take a photograph, that's how it's going to look. So, well, as artists, we can fake people out. We can fool them and make things look further away by making it lighter and with less detail. Obviously, things that are up close, you can probably see little rocks and bushes and pieces of grass. Off in the distance, not so much. So let's back up a little bit here. If we go back to this value and focus one, notice how this one up front is really rich and dark, lots of contrast, and you can see all the detail. And this one in the distance is very light. So let's try to draw something in that box. Let's see here. I think I will draw. What to draw? I'll draw a tree. So this tree right here, it's got a trunk, and I can see the bark on the trunk. I can see the grass down here. And I'm just going to use the side of my pencil to draw all kinds of leaves. So I can really see the texture, see all those rough leaves. Of course, I could spend a lot more time on this, but we're just drawing a little sketch. Now, I'm going to draw a tree way back here in the distance. And I'm just going to make this one a little lighter. Can't quite see as much detail. It's just kind of more faded. And this one back here, it's just very light. Can't see as much detail. So it actually makes things look further away when you don't add all that texture and all that detail. We could do the same with some mountains that are back here. Let's just draw a few more little mountains in the distance using some simple overlapping. Maybe this mountain here has lots of details. I can see rocks and things. And we'll make it a bit darker. This one back here. This one's a little bit lighter. This one is even lighter still. This one way back here in the distance is super light, way far away. So that's the idea of value and focus, meaning that the value gets lighter and lighter because, of course, value is how light or dark something is. So by changing the value, it actually looks further away, but also the focus. And what I mean by focus is the detail. You can focus on little details. You might even see a little apple on the ground here and little bits of leaves and grass. Back here, you're not going to see that. You can't, we just can't focus like, say, an eagle might be able to. You know, an eagle could fly over and see about a mile down and catch a mouse that's way down here. Our eyes are limited. So in addition to the dust in the atmosphere, we just simply can't see with such clarity at such a distance. We're just human. All right, last one is linear perspective, which has that word line in it. We're going to do a whole unit on linear perspective. And that's using lines to create the illusion of depth. So let me fast forward a bit here. Whoops, back up. So here's one with linear perspective. This is creating the illusion of space, but by using lines. So these lines in the sidewalk get closer and closer and closer together. These lines in the road get smaller and smaller. The lines on the side of this building and this fence all look like they're going to a vanishing point. So I'm going to show you that system this year, so you can learn how to use lines to create depth. But for now, let's do this, a real simple drawing. Just, make a horizon out here. And let's draw a couple lines like this. And let's make some lines in the road that are getting shorter and shorter and shorter as they go toward this vanishing point. Let's do one more thing. Let's draw a simple house over here. We've done this before, but let's just go like this. And I'm gonna make this horizon a little higher because it's gonna be tangent or competing with this line. So maybe my landscape comes over this way. There we go. All right, so I'm gonna draw a line from the top of my house to that, and from that roof line, and from the bottom. And now I'm using lines to create depth. Another rooftop line and side line. There we go. And so now I've got a house sitting out here in the middle of nowhere. So what I'd like you to do is just play with this for a second and try to get all of these different, illusions of space in this last scene. You could, let's put some cacti in here. This one's really close. This one's a little further away. These are really far away. Let's do some overlapping. Well, we've already got some of that with our mountains. Maybe we can overlap a cloud with another cloud. We could do some shading where these are lighter and these ones are a little bit darker. So we can play with value and focus. We can put some small details out here. We can't really tell what they are. But maybe some larger details here. Maybe there's some tumbleweed. We can see their details here. We'll put a small house out here in the distance so we can mess with size and placement. And folks, the point is, after a while, you use all of these to create a scene, okay? So those are the 6 illusions of space. They're going to be really helpful when it comes to drawing landscapes and architecture, perspective drawing, still life, just about anything. So now you know the secrets of the masters.